You've probably heard the word kolkhoz in negative sense about Soviet agriculture. So today I would like to talk about kolkhoz, its definition, reason to be created, and why it was inefficient. Agriculture was an important aspect of Russian Empire economy. It exported 13 million pounds of grain in 1913. The problem of land to whom it should belong to was a question in minds of Russian intelligentsia from 1860s. Although serfdom was abandoned by Alexander II, peasants did not receive land for free. So, in 1917, Bolsheviks understood that peasants want land and they needed to attract them to Bolshevik side. Their first decrees were about peace with Germans and about land. According to it, all agricultural land was given to peasants. In 1918, Bolsheviks tried to rearrange lands. They started to create collective farms. In 1918, there were 975 communes and 604 artels. On May 13, 1918, the government announced food dictatorship in the village. It meant that government officials could confiscate bread excesses from peasants. Food dictatorship was caused by a difficult food situation in Russia. Peasants didn't want to sell their bread with fixed Bolshevik prices. And Bolsheviks were pressured by the cities where there was lack of bread. Of course, this policy led to discontent among peasants, especially richer ones. So in 1921, the party abolished food dictatorship and introduced a new tax. By 1928, USSR almost achieved the grain production level of Russian Empire in 1913. So USSR started to export grain again. The government received money which were used to subsidize industrialization. But the money they received was not enough, so Bolsheviks came up with the idea of collectivization. Collectivization meant collective farming. In that kolkhoz, all land and equipment was shared, and money were divided equally. Peasants who worked in kolkhoz still had their own small houses with little land, where they could grow food for themselves. One part of the harvested produce, peasants had to sell to the government for fixed or cheap prices. Another part they had to sell to pay the rent for the equipment. If there was something left, peasants could sell it with market prices. Peasants did not receive any payment for working in kolkhoz. At first, they had to work 60 to 100 days in a year. In the 1950s, they had to work 200 to 250 days a year. If you add holidays, it will make a full year. Another purpose of kolkhoz was extermination of kulaki, or rich peasants. Those who during 1920s were able to trade well their excess products. 2 million people were accused to be kulaki. NKVD took away all their assets and deported to remote areas. In 1937, collective farms took 86% of all farming lands in USSR. It helped to increase production of grain. 20–30% of Soviet Union profits was done through grain export. But inside the country, people had no bread to eat. People received the bread using food cards. In some areas, there was famine. By 1940s, the situation with bread inside the country was stabilized, and food cards were cancelled. But the amount of grain did not increase. The biggest problem, which parasites all economy sectors in communist countries, was lack of motivation of workers. Peasants in kolkhoz did not want to produce more or better quality because they knew that the government would always give them the same low price. In 1946, the government restricted peasants' activities on their own lot of land. They taxed every single fruit tree in the yard. Also, peasants in Kolkhoz had no passports, so even if they wanted to, they could not move from Kolkhoz. After Stalin's death in 1953, Malenkov made some positive reforms in agriculture. Malenkov decreased agricultural tax in twice, cancelled areas from previous years, and proposed new way of taxation for villagers. He allowed peasants to increase their lands in 5 times. But after Khrushchev outflanked Malenkov, he changed the policy course in agriculture, as he had another vision. To develop agriculture, Khrushchev wanted to make collective farms in Kazakhstan. It was called Tselina. To develop kolkhoz there, 1 million people were forcibly sent to Central Asia. In the long run, kolkhoz in Kazakhstan could not be effective, as the climate is too dry and the land requires lots of fertilizers. But he could achieve a small victory and acquired 125 million tons of grain. Khrushchev's failures in agriculture continued when he decided to bring corn to Soviet Union. After his visit to United States, Khrushchev was very impressed by American corn fields and its harvest. For 1 hectare, you could get 100 centners of corn, while we just give you 20-25 centners. But of course, peasants could not get 100 centners. First, all American cornfields were further south than Krasnodar, for example. And second, there was no motivation. Khrushchev blamed all kolkhoz workers. He decided that they were not motivated, not because of essential collectivization problem, but because they spent too much time at their own lots. Their lots were decreased, taxes increased, cattle breed was limited. All this led to products deficit, which inspired Novocherkass revolt from June 1st to 3rd, 1962. It was oppressed by force. Khrushchev's reforms failed and he was impeached in 1964. As the next leader, Brezhnev tried to solve problems with kolkhoz. Brezhnev allowed personal lots again. Kolkhoz workers now got payment, and in 1976 they got passports. Young people started to leave kolkhoz. From 1969 to 1989, kolkhoz population decreased by 10%. So in 1980s, there was a practice to send students to kolkhoz in September to help harvest. Of course, labor was not paid. Despite Brezhnev's and Gorbachev's investment into agriculture, there was still product deficit. Agriculture development was too slow in contrast to population growth and paycheck growth. Prices for food were fixed, so the disbalance between paycheck and goods was deficit of food products. People had money but nowhere to spend it. USSR stopped to export grain as oil was found in Western Siberia. Soviet Union exported oil and started to import grain and bread. In 1985, USSR imported 45 million tons of wheat. After collapse of Soviet Union in 1991, kolkhoz disappeared. All farms now based on market mechanism. In 2022, Russia harvested 156 million tons of grain and started to export again. I hope now you have a better understanding of kolkhoz. Thank you for watching my videos. Please subscribe to my channel and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!